He was just supposed to fix her fence. That's all it was supposed to be. A busted post, some warped boards, a fair day's pay. But the moment Ethan Walker stepped through that iron gate and saw Selena Brooks standing alone in the middle of her storm-wrecked yard, barefoot, arms crossed, looking at the damage like she was used to cleaning up after things she didn't break, he felt something shift in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. Something inconvenient, something that had no business being there. This is the story of two people who thought they were too worn down to start over. They were wrong. If this story already has you hooked, hit that like button right now and drop your city in the comments. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now settle in, because this one is going to take a while, and it's worth every minute. The storm came through Millhaven on a Tuesday night, and by Wednesday morning it had left the kind of mess that takes a week to clean up and a month to forget. Ethan Walker found out about it the way he found out about most things. Not from the news, not from his phone, but from the physical world telling him directly. He was loading his truck at 6:15 in the morning, tossing his tool bag into the bed and watching his breath fog in the cold air, when his neighbor from 3 houses down, old Carl Hutchins, who walked his dog every morning at the same time regardless of weather or personal crisis, stopped on the sidewalk and nodded toward the east end of the street. "Bad one last night," Carl said. "Heard something go down over by the Brooks place around midnight. Sounded like a whole section of fence gave out." Ethan glanced up the street. He couldn't see the Brooks estate from where he stood. It was set back from the road, behind a long line of hedges that had survived 20 years of storms and probably would survive 20 more. But he could see the debris scattered across the pavement, broken branches, a plastic lawn chair that had traveled at least 100 yards from somewhere, shingles from what looked like a gazebo roof. "She know about it yet?" Ethan asked. Carl shrugged. "Her lights were on at 5, so probably." Ethan nodded, loaded the last of his gear, and went inside to get his daughter ready for school. Lily was 7, and she had inherited from her mother the particular talent of making simple things complicated. Getting her shoes on in the morning was a negotiation. Getting her to eat breakfast was a diplomatic operation. Getting her out the door on time required the kind of focused energy that Ethan had learned to start building the night before, the way you bank a fire so it's ready in the morning. "Dad?" Lily said, standing in the kitchen in her socks, holding one shoe. "I think I left my reading folder at Grandma's." "I know." "We need it for today." "I know. I called Grandma last night. She's going to drop it at the school by 8. Lily looked at him the way she sometimes did, like she was recalibrating something, updating her model of the world to include the fact that her father was usually 3 steps ahead, even when he seemed distracted. She put on the shoe without further argument. He dropped her at the school gate at 7:42, watched her run inside with her backpack bouncing, and then sat in the truck for a moment with the engine idling. He had 3 jobs lined up for the week: a kitchen backsplash in Ferndale, a deck repair on the north side, and a commercial door installation that was supposed to start Thursday. None of them were urgent this morning. None of them would fall apart if he was 40 minutes late. He thought about Carl's words. The Brooks place. He'd lived on Alderton Street for 6 years, and in that time, he'd exchanged maybe 30 words with Selena Brooks. She was the kind of neighbor you were aware of without actually knowing. You knew her car, a dark blue Audi that sat in the driveway most weekday mornings until 8:30. And you knew her assistant, a young woman named Dana, who sometimes collected packages from the front step. And you knew her reputation, which was the kind that preceded a person whether they wanted it to or not. Selena Brooks, 30 years old, CEO of Vertex Property Group, a real estate technology company that had apparently built some kind of platform that was changing the way commercial leases were negotiated, though Ethan had only a vague understanding of what that actually meant. He'd heard her name on a local business segment once, driving home from a job. He'd seen her picture in a framed magazine cover on display in the window of a print shop downtown. A promotional thing, local business spotlight, that kind of article. She was successful. She was private. She was, from what Ethan could observe from a distance, someone who had organized her life to minimize the amount of contact she had with people she hadn't explicitly chosen. He drove up Alderton Street, turned into the long gravel drive that led to her property, and parked near the side gate. The damage was worse than Carl had described. A full 30-foot section of the estate's perimeter fence had come down on the east side. Not just bent or leaning, but actually collapsed. Several of the posts snapped off at ground level. The horizontal rails splintered. The boards scattered across the grass in a pattern that suggested the wind had come from the northwest at a serious angle. There was a mature oak nearby that had lost a large limb, and from the way the debris was distributed, Ethan could see that the limb had come down on the fence first, and the fence had taken the impact and failed. He was crouched down, examining one of the broken posts, checking how deep it had been set, when he heard the side door of the house open. Selena Brooks came across the yard in boots and a heavy coat, a mug of something in one hand and her phone in the other. She was a tall woman, broad-shouldered, with natural hair pulled back and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She moved like someone who was used to walking into situations that required her immediate assessment. She stopped a few feet away, looked at the fence, then looked at him. "Ethan Walker," she said. Not a question. She knew who he was. "Morning," he said. "Heard the storm got you." "Heard from Carl." "Carl." She looked back at the fence. "I was going to call someone today. You just showed up." "I was already in the truck," he said. "Figured I'd come see what the damage actually looked like before you had to deal with 3 different contractors giving you 3 different opinions on what it's going to cost." Something in her expression shifted slightly. Not warmth exactly, more like a minor recalibration. The same look Lily gave him sometimes. "And what does it actually look like?" "Repairable. Not cheap, but repairable. The posts that snapped were probably compromised before the storm, wood rot at the base. The storm just finished the job." If you want it done right, you're looking at replacing the whole east section, not just what fell. Otherwise, you'll be doing this again in 2 years. She considered that. She drank from her mug. "How long?" 2 days, maybe 3 if the ground's soft. I need to see what the post holes look like once we clear the debris." "And the cost?" He gave her a number. She didn't flinch, which he noted without comment. "Can you start today?" "I can start in an hour," he said. "I need to make a materials run." She nodded. "I'll have Dana leave the gate code for you." She paused, looked at him with a directness he hadn't expected. "I appreciate you coming over. You didn't have to do that." "I know," he said. She went back inside. He went to get lumber. By 9:30, he was back on the property. His truck backed up along the grass line, the radio on low, the morning cold enough that he was still in his work jacket. He'd pulled the remaining debris to one side, stacked the salvageable boards, and started the process of assessing which posts could be kept and which needed to come out entirely. The answer was, most of them needed to come out. He was working the first one loose, using a breaker bar, getting down in the dirt with it, the way this kind of work always went. When the side door opened again and Selena came out with 2 mugs, she held one out to him. He looked at it, then at her. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know. I wanted coffee and it seemed rude to not offer." She set the mug on the flat top of a surviving fence post. "I'm working out here for a bit. I do some of my calls outside when the weather's okay." He went back to the post. She settled into a lawn chair she'd brought out, opened her laptop, put in an earbud, and started what sounded like a call within about 30 seconds. She wasn't hovering. She wasn't watching him. She was just there. He found that oddly comfortable. Most people who stayed nearby while he worked either got in the way, asked too many questions, or made him feel like he was being monitored for mistakes. Selena was doing her own work in her own space, and the fact that their spaces happened to overlap was simply a fact, not a judgment. He worked for about 40 minutes before she finished her call and pulled the earbud out. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "How long have you been doing this? Construction, I mean." "Since I was 17, he said without stopping what he was doing. "Started doing summers with my uncle. He had a small renovation company. Nothing fancy. Kitchen remodels, bathroom work, framing. I picked it up fast, kept doing it, eventually went out on my own." "You like it?" He paused, actually thinking about it rather than giving the default answer. "Yeah," he said. "I like that you can see what you did at the end of the day. Not a lot of jobs are like that. You either fixed something or you didn't. It's clear." She was quiet for a moment. "I don't have many days like that." He glanced over. What do you mean? My work. She gestured vaguely at her laptop. I don't always know at the end of the day if I moved something forward or just kept it from moving backward. The markers are slow, and sometimes what looks like progress turns into a problem 3 months later. She shook her head slightly. Sorry, you didn't ask. I don't mind, he said, and he meant it. He found out she'd grown up in Portland. She found out he'd grown up in Millhaven, same neighborhood, different street. She found out he had a daughter named Lily. He found out she had a younger brother in Atlanta she talked to every Sunday because Sundays were the one day she wasn't in CEO mode, she said, and her brother didn't care what mode she was in anyway. It was a Tuesday when they had that conversation. By Friday, he knew she'd started the company at 26 with a partner who'd eventually bought her out of a different firm and given her the capital to launch on her own. He knew she'd moved to Millhaven because it was far enough from the company's main office in the city that she could disconnect, but close enough that she could be there in 40 minutes if something came apart. She knew he'd been married for 4 years. She knew his daughter's mother had left when Lily was 2. Not dramatically, not cruelly, but in a way that was in some respects worse. Quietly, the way a slow leak loses water, until one day there was just nothing left. She knew he'd been raising Lily alone since then, with help from his mother and a patchwork of childcare arrangements that had taken 2 years to get right. None of this was told in large pieces. It came out in small exchanges between tasks, while he was waiting for concrete to set, while she was between calls, while they were both eating lunch on the back step, which had happened twice now without anyone suggesting it or making it a thing. The fence was coming along. The new posts were in, the concrete curing, the rails going up. It was good work, solid work. He could see it taking shape, but there was something else taking shape too, and Ethan was the kind of man who noticed things even when he was trying not to. On the second afternoon, Lily had a half day at school. He'd arranged for his mother to pick her up, but his mother called at noon with car trouble, and his backup, his friend Marcus, who had covered for him more times than Ethan could count, was in the middle of a job site emergency 2 towns over and couldn't break away. By 12:30, Ethan was on the phone trying to find a solution, and Selena, who had come out to bring him a sandwich because apparently that was just something she was doing now, caught the tail end of the conversation. "What's going on?" she said. He explained. "Bring her here," Selena said. "I can't. You're in the middle of a job. The job is here. Bring her here. She can sit inside with the TV or in the yard, I don't care. I'm working anyway." He looked at her. "You sure?" "I said it, didn't I?" So he picked up Lily, and Lily came to the estate, and within about 4 minutes she had introduced herself to Selena with the full confidence of a 7-year-old who had been raised to speak to adults like they were peers, and Selena had responded with the same directness she used with everyone, which Lily apparently found completely acceptable. By 2 o'clock, Lily was at the kitchen table doing homework, and Selena was working nearby. And when Ethan came in to wash his hands, he stood in the doorway for a moment watching the two of them in comfortable silence and felt something land in his chest that he wasn't ready to name. The trouble came on Friday afternoon, about 20 minutes before the job was supposed to be done. He'd been expecting something, in the way you sometimes sense weather before it arrives. The week had been too easy in a way that made him uneasy. Something good was building, and something good building usually meant something was about to push back. The car that pulled through the front gate was black, expensive, and driven by someone who moved like he expected to be watched. The man who got out was maybe 55, silver-haired, in a coat that had not come from anywhere cheap, with the particular expression of a person who has learned to make their disapproval felt before they've said a single word. Ethan had seen men like this before. He'd worked on enough high-end properties to know the type. This was a man who organized the world into assets and liabilities and made rapid determinations about which category you fell into. Selena came out of the house about 30 seconds later, and the shift in her posture was subtle, but Ethan caught it. Her shoulders went back, her chin came up. She was in a different mode now, professional armor, fully on. "Harrison," she said, "I wasn't expecting you." "I was in the area," said the man. Harrison. "Thought I'd stop in. The Caldwell deal is still unresolved, and I wanted to discuss the board's position directly." "You could have called." "I prefer in person for matters like this." His eyes moved to Ethan, then around the yard, taking a quiet inventory. I didn't realize you were having work done. Storm damage, Selena said. Fence repair. Harrison's gaze came back to Ethan and stayed there for a moment longer than necessary. There was something in it. Not hostile exactly, but evaluating. Curious in the particular way that is actually suspicion wearing a polite coat. I see, Harrison said. He looked at Selena. Is this a good time? You said you were stopping in, Selena said. That implies you're not waiting for a good time. Ethan turned back to what he was doing, which was attaching the final section of top rail. He could hear them behind him, their voices lowered but not gone, the conversation in corporate shorthand that he couldn't fully follow and wasn't trying to. But then Harrison said something that made Ethan go still. I have to say, Selena, you've been harder to reach this week than usual. I didn't know if it was the Caldwell situation or something personal. A pause. I hope you're not letting things here get complicated. Another pause. He's a contractor, Harrison said more quietly. He's on your property. I'm just noting that the optics, Selena said flatly, cutting him off, of having my fence repaired. Of the arrangement, Harrison said. You're generous sometimes, Selena, to your own detriment. People can tell when someone has influence over you. Ethan drove the last screw in. He could feel his jaw tightening, and he was consciously keeping his hand steady, keeping his movements professional, keeping his face somewhere it needed to be. No one has influence over me that I haven't chosen, Selena said. Her voice had not risen, but something in it had gone very precise. And I'd ask you to be careful with that kind of observation, Harrison. You are a board member, not my manager. I'm concerned about the company's image. Then bring it to a board meeting, she said, with documentation and a specific complaint and your name on the paperwork, not in my backyard on a Friday afternoon. She moved to hold the gate open. I'll have my assistant follow up about Caldwell on Monday. There was a long silence, then the sound of Harrison's shoes on the gravel, moving toward the gate. His car door opened and closed. The engine started. Ethan was still at the fence, tool in hand, not turning around. Sorry you heard that, Selena said behind him. Don't be, he said. He's not... She stopped, started over. He's not wrong that I've been distracted this week. Ethan finally turned to look at her. She was standing with her arms crossed, but not defensively. More like she was holding herself together against a cold wind that wasn't there. There was a tiredness in her face that she hadn't let him see before. If that causes you problems, he said carefully, I don't want to be that for you. You're not the problem, she said. You're the only thing this week that hasn't felt like a problem. He held her gaze for a moment, then looked away, back at the fence. Last piece goes in about 20 minutes, he said. She stood there a little longer, then went inside. His ex-wife called at 4:15. He was cleaning up the work site, loading the last of the scrap lumber into the truck bed, when his phone buzzed. He saw the name, Rachel, and answered out of the habit of years, even though his first instinct was to let it go. I heard you're working on the Brooks place, Rachel said. He went still. How do you know that? Marcus told me. We ran into each other at the hardware store. A pause. How long has that been going on? It's a job, Rachel. That's not what Marcus said. Marcus doesn't know anything. He hasn't been here. He said you mentioned it. Another pause, and this one had a quality to it he recognized. The gathering kind before something dropped. I'm just saying, Ethan, you have Lily with you most of the week. Before you get wrapped up in something that's going to complicate your life, think about whether that's what she needs right now. Lily is fine, he said. Lily is better than fine. You get attached fast. You always have. And when it falls apart, you go somewhere dark. I've seen it. Rachel, I'm not trying to fight. I'm saying this because I still care about Lily, and I know how you are. You find someone who needs something fixed, and you make it your whole life. He was quiet for a moment. The familiar weight of it, the old shape of the accusation, worn smooth from use. I hear you, he said, and he hung up. He stood beside his truck in Selena's driveway, in the cooling air of a Friday afternoon, and he let himself feel the full weight of it for about 45 seconds. Rachel wasn't entirely wrong. That was the particular pain of it. She wasn't entirely right either, but she wasn't entirely wrong. He was a man who fixed things. He had always been a man who fixed things. And somewhere in the last 6 years of being alone, being a father, being the person who showed up and got the job done, he had stopped being able to tell the difference between taking care of something and being needed by it. He went back to loading his truck. The fence was done. He could see it from where he stood. Clean posts, solid rails, good straight lines running east to west along the property edge. It would hold through any storm that came. He was sure of that. He gathered his tools, locked the truck, and went to knock on the side door to let Selena know the job was finished. She opened the door in a different coat now, and her glasses were off, and she looked tired. Not the professional tired of someone who had a hard day, but the real tired, the kind that lives in the bones. "It's done," he said. She looked past him at the fence. He saw something move across her face. Not relief exactly, but something in the neighborhood of it. "It looks good," she said. "It'll hold," he said. "If you have any settling in the first few weeks, call me and I'll come back out. No charge." She nodded. Then, "Harrison is going to make noise at the next board meeting." "I know. I'm not apologizing for how I handled it. I'm not asking you to." She looked at him for a moment in that direct way she had, like she was deciding something. "Are you okay?" she said. "You've been quiet for the last hour." He thought about Rachel's call. He thought about Lily at the kitchen table, doing homework in Selena's house, like it was the most natural thing in the world. He thought about his own hands, rough and calloused, and the way he'd driven that last screw in with his jaw clenched, while a man in a good coat implied that his presence was a liability. "I'm okay," he said. And then, because she was still looking at him, he added, "Had a call. Old stuff. Nothing that belongs here." "Old stuff tends to show up uninvited," she said. "Yeah," he said. "It does." She opened the door a little wider. "You want to come in for a few minutes? Not as anything, just, I have coffee on, and you look like you could use a minute before you drive." He looked at his truck. He looked at her. "Yeah," he said. "All right." He went inside. The door closed behind him. Outside, the repaired fence stood straight and solid against the darkening sky. The new wood pale against the old posts, the whole thing holding together in a way it hadn't managed to do before the storm came through and took apart everything it found weak. The coffee was dark and too strong, which was exactly what he needed. Selena's kitchen was not what he'd expected, though he couldn't have said what he had expected. Something more designed, maybe. More curated. The kind of kitchen that looks like it was arranged for a photograph. Instead, it was lived in. A stack of folders on the counter that hadn't made it to the office. A whiteboard on the wall covered in numbers and arrows, and 3 words circled in red that said Caldwell/timeline/leverage. A fruit bowl with 1 apple and a lot of empty space, and a post-it on the refrigerator in someone else's handwriting that said, "You forgot to eat lunch again." "Dana," Selena said, following his eyes to the post-it. "She leaves those when she's here. She thinks I'm going to forget how the human body works if she doesn't remind me." "Does it help?" "Sometimes." She poured her own cup and leaned against the counter. "Sit down if you want." He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Lily had done her homework 3 days ago, and wrapped both hands around the mug and let the warmth work into his fingers. The yard outside was blue with late afternoon light, and the fence ran straight and pale along the property edge, the new lumber still bright. "I keep looking at it," Selena said, nodding toward the window. "It'll weather in," he said. "Give it a season. It'll match." "I know. I'm not bothered by it." She sat down across from him, not the chair at the head of the table, but the one to the side, close enough for a real conversation. "I mean, I keep looking at it because it's fixed. It's just fixed, and it doesn't need anything else from me." He understood that. He didn't say so right away, just turned the mug in his hands. How long had the post been going? "The rot?" She shook her head. "I don't know. I don't look at the fence usually. I look at the fence when something goes wrong." She was quiet a moment. "That's probably a bad habit." "Most people do it that way," he said. "Most people also have someone around to notice before it becomes a problem." She said it without self-pity, just matter of fact, the same way she said most things.
But it sat in the room for a second, and they both let it. She asked about the call. Not directly. She didn't press. But she said, "You don't have to tell me what happened earlier, but I could tell it knocked something loose." He thought about deflecting. He was good at deflecting. 6 years of being the reliable one, the one who held things together, had given him a lot of practice at taking hits without showing the mark. But he was tired of that particular skill right now. "My ex called," he said. "Rachel. She heard I was working here. Someone mentioned it. And she had opinions. She said I get attached to things that need fixing, people, situations. She said I make it my whole life and then fall apart when it doesn't work." Selena was quiet, looking at him steadily, not filling the silence the way most people did. He found he could keep going. "She's not completely wrong," he said. "That's the thing. She's got enough right in it that I can't just dismiss it." "What part is right?" He thought about it honestly. "I do throw myself in. I always have. When I care about something, I go all the way. My uncle used to say I had a rescue complex. I think he meant it as a compliment, and it wasn't really." "What part is wrong?" He looked up. "The part that says I can't tell the difference between caring about someone and needing to fix them. I know the difference. I just sometimes pick things that hurt both." Selena nodded slowly. She turned her mug on the table, matching his gesture without seeming to notice. "She say anything else?" "She said to think about whether it's what Lily needs right now, getting caught up in something complicated." "And what do you think?" "I think Lily is a 7-year-old kid who did her homework at your table and asked you if you had any colored pencils, and you went and found some in a drawer somewhere and sat with her for 10 minutes while she drew a horse." He paused. "I don't think Lily's the one I need to worry about." Selena looked at him for a moment, then away, out the window at the fence. Something had changed slightly in her face. Not softened exactly, more like a layer had come down. The same layer that had gone up when Harrison arrived. "Harrison's going to push for a review of my Q3 decisions," she said, shifting gears with a directness that he was starting to recognize as just how she moved through things. "He's been building toward it for months. This just gave him an opening. Or he thinks it did." "What are the Q3 decisions?" "I declined 2 acquisitions the board wanted. I thought they were overvalued, and I thought the timing was wrong. I still think that. But when a CEO is a woman and she says no to a deal, some people stop asking if she's right and start asking if she's emotional." He set down his mug. "Is that what he was implying in the yard?" "That's what he's been implying for a year." She said it without heat, which in a way was more telling than anger would have been. The heat had burned down a long time ago, and what was left was just the plain knowledge of it. "He doesn't think I'm incompetent. That would almost be easier. He thinks I'm a liability because of how I look and how I live. Because I'm a large black woman who runs a company and doesn't pretend that her personal life doesn't exist. I'm too much of too many things for people like Harrison." "What do you do with that?" "I win," she said simply. "I build the company to where the numbers speak louder than his opinions. It's slow. It's exhausting. But it's the only thing that works." She paused. "Talking about it helps sometimes. I just don't have a lot of people I can say it to directly." "Why not?" "Because most people either want to reassure me that Harrison's wrong, or they want to tell me to fight back louder, or they start treating me like I'm fragile. None of those are useful." She looked at him. "You asked what I do with it. You didn't tell me what I should do. That's rarer than it sounds." He thought about that. "I don't know enough about your situation to tell you what to do," he said. "I just figured you already know more about it than I ever will." "See," she said, "that right there?" "Yeah." He left at 6. Lily was at his mother's for the night. His mother's car trouble had turned out to be a minor thing, fixed by noon. And the house was going to be quiet in the way he'd never fully gotten used to, even after 6 years of quiet evenings. He made dinner without really tasting it, stood at the kitchen window eating over the sink because there was no point in setting the table for one, and thought about the post-it on Selena's refrigerator. "You forgot to eat lunch again." He wondered who she ate lunch with, when she ate it. He wondered what she was doing right now, in that house, in that kitchen, with the whiteboard full of numbers and the fence sitting straight outside in the dark. He put his plate in the sink and told himself to stop wondering. He did not have a job on the Brooks property Saturday. The work was done, the invoice was sent,
and there was no professional reason to be in her driveway or her yard or her kitchen. He knew that clearly. He spent Saturday morning picking Lily up from his mother's, taking her to her soccer practice, sitting in the cold on the bleachers with 3 other parents and a thermos of bad coffee, watching 7-year-olds chase a ball with total commitment and absolutely no strategy. He loved these mornings. They were uncomplicated in a way that not many things were, and he needed uncomplicated the way other people needed sleep. Lily scored a goal that was mostly an accident and celebrated like she'd done it on purpose, which was, he thought, the correct approach. He drove her home. They made grilled cheese for lunch. She told him about a girl in her class named Priya, who had a dog that could open cabinet doors, and he asked the follow-up question she wanted him to ask, and they talked about whether they should get a dog, which was an ongoing conversation that had been ongoing for 2 years with no resolution in sight. "Selena has a yard," Lily said, at some point in the middle of this. He looked at her. She was eating her sandwich with full concentration, not looking at him, the way she sometimes said things she knew were going somewhere when she wanted to see if he'd follow. "She does," he said carefully. "It's a big yard. A dog would like it." "That's Selena's yard, not ours." "I know." Lily picked up the other half of her sandwich. "I liked her house." "Did you?" "She didn't baby talk me. I like that. Some adults talk to me like I'm a baby." "You're not a baby." "I know," she said, with the confidence of someone who has never once been in doubt about this. "She knows that too. She just talked to me regular." He looked at his daughter for a moment, this small, complete, thoroughly uncomplicated person who saw things clear and straight without all the machinery adults put in the way. "I'm glad you liked her," he said. "Are you going to see her again?" "I finished the job, so—" "Dad." Lily looked up at him with an expression that was too old for 7, and had been too old for 7 for about 3 years now. "I mean, are you going to see her? Not the job." He was quiet for a second. "I don't know," he said. "Okay," she said, and went back to her sandwich. But Selena texted him Sunday evening. Not about the fence, not about anything professional. She texted, "My brother thinks I should learn how to make jollof rice from scratch, because apparently buying it from the restaurant is not the same experience. Thoughts on whether this is reasonable." He read it twice. He put the phone down. He picked it up again. He texted back, "Depends on the restaurant. Some things aren't worth learning when someone else already does them better." Her response came in maybe 40 seconds. That is the most pragmatic and somehow also deeply romantic view of cooking I have ever heard. He laughed, actually laughed, in his empty living room on a Sunday night. He texted, "Not trying to be romantic, just trying to save you from a bad afternoon in the kitchen." She sent back, "Too late? Already bought the tomatoes. If this goes badly, I'm blaming you." He put the phone down, still smiling, and didn't pick it up again for 20 minutes because he was trying to think about something else and not managing it. The following Tuesday, she called. He was at the backsplash job in Ferndale, up on a ladder with tile adhesive on his forearms, and he almost didn't answer. Then he looked at the name and came down off the ladder. "Hey," he said. "Are you busy?" "I'm working. Give me 2 minutes." He stepped outside into the weak November sun and leaned against his truck. "Harrison filed a formal complaint with the board," she said, "last night. He's claiming my decision on the Caldwell acquisition was made under personal duress and that my judgment may be compromised." Ethan was quiet, processing that. "Can he do that?" "He has the board wait to call for a review, yes. He can't remove me unilaterally, but he can make the next 60 days incredibly unpleasant." "What does personal duress mean in this context?" A short pause. "He implied I've been spending significant time with someone I hired, and that it's affecting my professional clarity." The words landed flat and hard. He stood there with the phone to his ear and let the full shape of it settle in. Harrison had seen him in the yard for maybe 10 minutes and had built something out of it. Something that now had his name in a formal complaint document attached to a woman's professional record. "Selena," he said. "I need you to know I'm not calling because I want you to do anything," she said quickly. "I'm not asking you to make a statement or disappear I'm just telling you because I think you deserve to know." "What are you going to do?" I'm going to respond to the board with my documented decision-making process on Caldwell, which is thorough and clearly not made under duress because I made it 6 weeks before the storm and 5 weeks before you ever stepped on my property." Her voice was controlled, but he could hear what was underneath it. Not fear, but a kind of hard-held fury that had learned to hold its shape over years of practice. Harrison knows the timeline. He's hoping the board doesn't check it carefully. "What do you need?" "Nothing from you. She stopped. Started again. "I just needed to hear a voice that wasn't going to tell me to calm down or manage my image or consider how this looks." "You should be angry," he said. "This is worth being angry about." A silence. Then, "Thank you." "Don't thank me. The man's making stuff up about you. That's worth more than thank you. It's worth—" He caught himself. "What can I do? Realistically?" "Nothing. Realistically." A pause. "Maybe nothing yet." He went back inside after the call and finished the backsplash. He did good work. He always did good work, regardless of what was happening around him. It was one of the things he could reliably offer, solid work under pressure, showing up and doing the job even when his head was somewhere else. But his head was somewhere else. He drove home thinking about Harrison's complaint, thinking about what it meant that a man could look at a woman running her own company, making her own choices, and turn the fact that she'd talked to her neighbor into evidence of professional incompetence. Thinking about the machinery of it, how quickly an assumption became an implication, how quickly an implication became a document, how quickly a document became a problem that a woman had to spend 60 days defending herself against. He thought about Selena standing in her yard, arms crossed, facing Harrison with her voice gone quiet and precise, about the way she'd held the gate open, about the way she hadn't apologized afterward, not once. He pulled into his driveway, sat for a minute. He picked up his phone. He texted, "How's the jollof rice going?" The response came 3 minutes later. "Burned the first batch. Starting over. It's fine." He smiled at that. "Don't let the tomatoes win." "I never let anything win," she wrote back. He believed her. He went inside to make dinner for his daughter, and the house felt a little less quiet than it had the week before, and he wasn't entirely sure what to do with that. But for the first time in a while, he wasn't trying to talk himself out of it. The board review was scheduled for the second Thursday of November, which gave Selena 12 days to build her case. Ethan knew this because she told him on a Wednesday evening when he'd stopped by with a bag of hardware to fix a loose hinge on her side gate, something he'd noticed during the fence job, and mentioned he'd come back for a small thing, 20 minutes of work. She'd waved him in like he belonged there, which was a thing he was trying not to think too hard about, and they'd ended up at the kitchen table again with the remnants of her dinner still on the counter and her laptop open to a spreadsheet full of numbers that he couldn't read but that she was clearly living inside of. 12 days, she said, which sounds like enough time until you realize you also have to run the company while you're doing it. Harrison doesn't have that problem. He just has to show up and throw questions. What does your lawyer say? She says my documentation is solid, and Harrison overplayed his hand. She also says that doesn't mean the board will see it that way because boards are made of people, and people have biases, and sometimes the truth loses on a technicality. Selena closed the laptop. She's a very honest lawyer. I pay extra for that. Is there anything the documentation doesn't cover? She looked at him. What do you mean? You said the timeline clears you on the Caldwell decision. That's the technical case. But Harrison didn't just file on the Caldwell decision. He filed on your judgment. There's probably a wider argument he's building. She was quiet for a moment, studying him. You sound like you've been in a boardroom before. I've been in enough job site meetings where someone's trying to build a case against a decision they didn't like. The structure's the same. They can't beat the facts, so they go after the person. Yes, she said slowly. That's exactly what he's doing. She pulled the laptop back open. He's going to argue pattern, not just Caldwell. He'll pull in the Renfield deal from Q2, where I moved slower than the board wanted, and the Marsh Street project, where I pushed back on the contractor timeline. She rubbed the side of her face. He's framing me as someone who second-guesses momentum. Are those decisions defensible? Renfield, yes. That deal had legal exposure no one was acknowledging. Marsh Street, also yes. The contractor they wanted had 2 unresolved complaints with the city licensing board. I found it. I raised it. We avoided what would have been a liability. She looked at him. But I was right quietly. I stopped the bad thing from happening, so there's no dramatic outcome to point to. The board doesn't always notice the fires you prevent. Then document the fires, he said. Not just your process. Show what would have happened. Hire someone to run a risk assessment on the Renfield deal if you'd proceeded as the board wanted. Get it on paper. She stared at him. What? He said. Nothing. Keep going. If the pattern he's building is that you slow things down, your counter pattern is that you slow things down because speed without information costs more. You need specific numbers, not general principles. She was already typing. He watched her for a moment, then stood up and took his coffee cup to the sink, rinsed it, set it in the dish rack. When he turned around, she was still typing, fast, the way she moved when she was in the zone, completely present, completely focused, all that intelligence turned in one direction like a light beam. He went to fix the gate hinge and gave her room to work. But he came back inside 40 minutes later to tell her the hinge was done, and she looked up from the laptop like she'd forgotten he was there, and then immediately looked slightly annoyed at herself for forgetting. The risk assessment idea, she said. That's going to be the backbone of the whole response. I don't know why I didn't see it before. You've been living inside the problem, he said. Hard to see the shape of something when you're in the middle of it. Is that from experience? 6 years of being a single parent, he said. You get so close to the immediate problem, the homework, the dinner, the schedule, the money, that you stop being able to see whether the whole thing is actually working. You need someone to stand back and tell you what it looks like from the outside. She was looking at him with that particular stillness she had sometimes. Not staring, just taking him in, the way you read something you want to understand rather than just get through. Lily's lucky, she said. Most days I'm just trying to not screw it up too badly. That's what lucky looks like, she said. Someone trying that hard. He didn't have an answer for that, so he picked up his jacket from the chair and told her he had to get home. And she said thank you for the hinge, and he said it wasn't anything, and the whole small exchange had the texture of something that was careful without being cold. Two people who were aware of the edges without wanting to define them yet. The 12 days passed the way busy days do, faster than they should, leaving the impression of events without all the details. Ethan had his own work, his own schedule, Lily's parent-teacher conference on a Monday evening, where her teacher, a young woman named Mrs. Okafor, told him that Lily was doing very well academically, and that her main observable quality was that she said exactly what she thought at all times with no apparent social filter. Is that a concern? He asked. Mrs. Okafor considered it. It's a quality that will serve her well eventually. Currently, it occasionally surprises the other children. He drove home thinking that this was probably accurate and not something that was going to change regardless of what he did, and that this was fine. He saw Selena twice in those 12 days. Once when she came over to his side of the street on a Saturday morning, something she had apparently never done before, because old Carl Hutchins stopped mid-walk to stare, to return a level she'd borrowed from his truck without really asking, having needed it to hang something and having assumed, correctly, that he wouldn't mind. The second time was an evening walk that turned into a conversation on the sidewalk in front of the hedges, standing in the cold for 45 minutes while Selena talked through the board presentation structure, and Ethan asked the kind of flat, practical questions that she said helped her find the holes. You should have been a lawyer, she said. I don't like sitting still that long, he said. They talked about other things too. He told her about the deck job on the north side, which had turned complicated because the homeowner had decided mid-project that he wanted a built-in bench added, and the homeowner's wife had decided she wanted the whole thing in a different color, and these two decisions were in conflict in ways the homeowner had not yet acknowledged. She laughed at this, a real laugh, not the polished professional version, something that had gravel in it. People always know what they want after they see what they asked for, she said. Every time, he said. She told him about her brother Marcus. Different Marcus from Ethan's friend, she had clarified the first time she mentioned him, which had caused a brief confusion, who was a high school history teacher in Atlanta and had an opinion about everything and delivered those opinions with complete confidence, regardless of whether he knew anything about the subject. He told me last week I was handling the board situation wrong, she said. I asked him if he had any experience with corporate governance. He said no. I asked why he was giving advice. He said because he loves me. I told him that's not actually a qualification. What did he say? He said it was the most important qualification. She shook her head. And then I agreed with him, which is incredibly annoying. Brothers are like that, Ethan said. He didn't have one, but he understood the principle. Do you have siblings? A sister, in Phoenix. We're close in the way you're close when you grew up together and now live separate lives. We talk enough. She sends Lily things for her birthday that are always slightly too old, like she's guessing Lily is growing faster than she is. Does Lily mind? Lily loves it. She thinks her aunt sees her as basically an adult. Selena smiled at that. The streetlight caught the side of her face, and Ethan looked at the hedges. Go get warm, he said. You've got the board thing in 3 days. I know. She pulled her coat tighter. Thank you. For the sounding board. And the hinge and all of it. You built the case yourself, he said. I just asked questions. That's not nothing, she said. She went back through the gate. He walked home with his hands in his pockets and the cold air moving across the street and the feeling, persistent and inconvenient, that something was happening that he hadn't chosen and couldn't stop and wasn't sure he wanted to. The board meeting was a Thursday. He was on a job site, doing the door installation that had been pushed twice, working with his subcontractor Phil, a quiet, competent man who had worked with Ethan for 3 years and who asked no questions about anything unrelated to the task at hand, which Ethan valued deeply. At 11:17, he felt his phone buzz in his pocket. He was holding a door frame and couldn't check it. At 11:49, he had a break and pulled it out. It's done. They accepted the risk assessment framework. Harrison's formal complaint has been noted but tabled pending no further concerns. I gave a 40-minute presentation and answered questions for another 20. My hands didn't shake. I'm counting that as a win. He typed back, It was always going to go that way. The documentation was solid. Her response, You say that like it was certain. It wasn't certain. He thought about that. No, but you were ready. That made the odds good. A longer pause this time. Then, I'm getting lunch. Real lunch. Sitting down. Dana is making me. Good, he typed. Eat something. He put the phone away and went back to work. And he was smiling in a way that Phil definitely noticed and definitely did not comment on, because Phil was a professional. The problem with Harrison, the real problem, the one that didn't go away when the board meeting went right, was that he didn't stop. Ethan found out on a Saturday, not from Selena, but from a name in his contacts he hadn't expected. He was in the lumberyard, walking the aisles for a project he was pricing, when his phone rang and the name on the screen was Dana Reyes, Selena's assistant, who had put the gate code in his phone during the fence job and apparently kept the number. I don't normally do this, Dana said, without introduction or preamble, in the voice of someone who has made a decision and is moving before they can unmake it. But I think you should know something. He stopped walking. Okay. Harrison has been making calls to people in the professional contractor networks around Millhaven, asking about Ethan Walker, his work history, any complaints, any professional issues. A pause. I heard about it from my cousin who works at a supply company. Someone called asking about you specifically. Ethan stood very still in the lumber aisle with the phone against his ear and felt something cold move through him that wasn't the November air. When? He said. This week, after the board meeting. Dana's voice was tight. I don't think Selena knows. I think he's trying to find something he can use later, or just trying to put pressure on the situation. I don't know which. Does he know who you are in this conversation? No, and I'd like to keep it that way. Understood. He thought for a moment. Dana, has he talked to anyone at the company about me? Directly? Not that I know of. Not yet. She paused. I know this isn't your problem officially, but I thought you deserved to know someone's going through your professional record. After she hung up, he stood in the lumber aisle for another minute, a 2x6 in his hand that he wasn't seeing. He had a clean record. 14 years of work, no unresolved complaints, 2 licensing certifications and a general contractor's license that he'd maintained without interruption. There was nothing for Harrison to find. He knew that. But that wasn't the point. The point was that Harrison was willing to go looking, which meant Harrison had decided that Ethan was part of the problem to be eliminated, not a person, a complication in a power structure, something to be investigated and discredited or, failing that, made uncomfortable enough to go away. He put the 2x6 back on the shelf and drove to Selena's house. She opened the door in work clothes, mid-Saturday, clearly still in the middle of something, reading glasses on and a pen in her hand. She looked at his face and the pen lowered. "What happened?" she said. He told her. He said it plainly, without drama, the way Dana had said it to him. He watched the information move across Selena's face, the first beat of surprise, then something hardening underneath it, the way ground freezes. She took off her glasses. "He's going after your reputation. He's looking for one. He won't find anything because there's nothing there. But that's not the point, and we both know it." "The point is the pressure," she said. She moved away from the door, back into the house, and he followed. She was thinking he could see it, processing, reorganizing, the same way she'd looked at the whiteboard the first time he'd really watched her work. "He's trying to make you feel like being in my life has a cost. And maybe he's trying to make me feel like having you in my life has a cost." "Does it?" he said. She turned to look at him. "I already had a formal complaint filed against me. If that's the cost of having one honest conversation with someone I trust, it's not a very impressive deterrent." "Selena." He said her name more carefully. "I don't want to be something that gives him ammunition. If this keeps building, I'm not going to manage my personal life around what Harrison might do with it," she said. Her voice had gone to that precise, controlled place again, but this time he could hear what was underneath it more clearly. Not fury, but something older and more tired. A woman who had been making calculations about how to exist in spaces that didn't fully want her for a very long time, and who was absolutely done making those particular calculations anymore. "I didn't say you should," he said. "You were about to suggest some version of stepping back." He was quiet. "You were," she said. "Because that's what you do. Someone tells you you're a problem, you start figuring out how to be less of one." She looked at him with the directness he'd come to know as just her baseline. "I'm not asking you to not be careful. I'm asking you to not disappear." He stood in her hallway with that landing on him, heavier than he'd expected. She was right. He'd come over here half prepared to say something responsible and measured about distance, about not complicating her situation, about letting the professional thing stay professional until all this was settled. He told himself it was for her sake, and some of it was, but some of it was the other thing, the old reflex, the one Rachel had named, the one that moved toward the exit before anyone could decide he was the problem. "I'm not disappearing," he said. "Good," she said. "Then sit down and let me tell you what I'm going to do about Harrison, because I've been building toward this for about 48 hours, and I need someone to tell me if it's as solid as I think it is." He sat down. She stood at the counter, too wound up to sit, he realized, and started talking. What she was planning was not a defensive move. It was the opposite. She was going to bring a counter-proposal to the board before Harrison could escalate further. Not about the personal complaint, she was leaving that alone, but about Vertex's acquisition strategy for the next 18 months. A full presentation, numbers and projections, built on the risk framework she'd already established. Not a defense. A vision statement. Something so clearly forward-looking that any board member paying attention would see Harrison's maneuvering for what it was. A backward argument from someone who didn't like where the company was going. "If I give them something to vote for instead of a fight to adjudicate," she said, "I take the oxygen out of whatever he's building." Ethan listened to the whole thing. He asked 4 questions, the kind that pushed at the weak points, and she answered 3 of them solidly, and the 4th one gave her pause. "That's the gap," he said. "The 18-month timeline assumes a market rate environment that isn't guaranteed." "I know, I need a contingency scenario." She was already writing. "Slower growth track with the same strategic logic." "If you have 2 tracks and both of them work, you're not locked in. Harrison can't say you're betting the company on one outcome." She looked up from what she was writing. "You would have been a very good CEO, you know that?" "I don't want to be a CEO," he said. "I want to build things." "Same skill set, different output. Different lifestyle," he said. "I don't want to spend my Saturdays doing this." "And yet," she said, with something that was almost a smile. "And yet," he agreed, Outside, the afternoon light was going, and the fence sat solid and pale along the property edge, holding the boundary between her world and the wider one. They worked for another hour at the kitchen table, her writing, him reading drafts and asking questions, both of them drinking coffee that went cold and got replaced. And at some point, the shape of the evening shifted from problem-solving into something quieter, something that didn't need to be named or decided on, just allowed. When he finally left, walking back up Alderton Street in the dark, he thought about what she'd said. "I'm asking you to not disappear." He turned it over in his mind the whole walk home, the cold air against his face, the neighborhood quiet around him. He had spent 6 years being steady, being the one who showed up, being reliable in a way that, somewhere along the line, had started to mean being invisible, present but not present, there but not there, available for everyone else's needs in a way that had hollowed out some space inside him that he hadn't figured out how to fill. He was not going to disappear. He went home and checked on Lily, who was asleep with her arm thrown over a stuffed elephant, and he stood in her doorway for a moment in the dark. Then he went to bed, and for the first time in a long time, he slept without waking in the middle of the night. Selena presented to the board on a Tuesday. Ethan didn't know the exact time it started. She hadn't told him, and he hadn't asked, because that felt like the right amount of space to hold. He was at a job in the east part of town, a bathroom renovation that had turned into a structural problem behind the walls, the way bathroom renovations often did, and he was pulling out rotted subfloor when his phone buzzed at 2:14 in the afternoon. "It's done. Same room, different outcome. Call you later." He read it twice, set the phone down on a clean section of floor, and went back to work. She called at 6:30 when he was in the truck outside his mother's house, waiting to pick up Lily. 4 board members asked questions about the contingency scenarios, she said. Harrison asked one question and it was a bad one. It showed he hadn't read the full document. One of the other members actually pointed that out. Not me. Him. A pause. The board approved the strategic framework as presented, pending standard quarterly review. "That's a good outcome," Ethan said. "It's not a complete outcome. Harrison is still on the board. He's not going anywhere. But he spent political capital on this fight and came out with nothing, and the other members saw that." She was quiet for a moment. "It's not over, but today was solid. You built a good case." "We built a good case," she said. He didn't argue that. "How do you feel?" A longer pause than he expected. "Tired," she said. "The real kind. Not the kind you push through. The kind where you've been running on adrenaline for 2 weeks and now the adrenaline stopped." Another pause. "And something else. Like I've been fighting to prove I belong in a room I built with my own hands. And I won the argument again. And I'm glad. But I'm also so tired of having to make the argument." He sat with that. "Yeah," he said. "That kind of tired doesn't go away after one good day." "No," she said. "It doesn't." Lily came out the front door of his mother's house, backpack over one shoulder, waving at him through the windshield. He held up one finger. "I have to go get Lily," he said. "Go," Selena said. "And Ethan, thank you for all of it." "Get some sleep," he said. He hung up and watched Lily run toward the truck and felt the two things sitting side by side in his chest. The relief for Selena and the weight of what she'd said. Tired of having to make the argument. He knew something about that. Not the same argument, not the same room, but the same underlying exhaustion of constantly proving you were worth taking seriously. Lily got in and immediately started telling him about something that had happened at school involving a misplaced art project and a fire drill at a critically bad moment, and he drove home listening to every word. December came in cold and clear. Ethan had more work than he could comfortably handle, which was the good problem, the one he preferred to its alternative. He had a kitchen renovation in Ferndale that was going to run through the new year, a small commercial build-out for a local business that had hired him based on a referral, and a steady stream of smaller repair jobs that came in through word of mouth, the way they always did when winter arrived and people noticed the things in their houses that were only getting worse. He and Selena settled into something that didn't have a clean name. They weren't dating, not in the formal sense, not with the explicit conversation about it,
But they talked almost every day, sometimes briefly and sometimes not.
He came over twice more in the first 2 weeks of December. Once to look at a water stain on the ceiling of her office that turned out to be a slow leak from the bathroom above, which he fixed in an afternoon, and once for no professional reason at all, just because she'd texted asking if he'd eaten dinner, and he hadn't, and she'd said she had too much soup. The soup was good. She'd made it herself, which she admitted with a kind of defensive preemptiveness that suggested she expected him to be surprised. "I can cook," she said. "I just don't always do it." "I didn't say anything." "You had a face." "I didn't have a face." "You had a face like you were recalibrating something." He ate the soup. It was genuinely good. A tomato base with white beans and something smoky he couldn't identify. "What's the smoky thing?" "Smoked paprika, my mother's recipe." She sat down across from him with her own bowl. "She was a better cook than me. I've been trying to get back to her level for about 8 years. Are you close?" "Some things, yes. This soup, maybe. Her jollof, not even remotely." She shook her head. "My brother got the cooking gene somehow. It skipped me and then doubled back for him." "Is your mother still—" "She passed 4 years ago," Selena said. Not with the careful delivery of someone saying it for the first time, but the practiced steadiness of someone who has said it many times and made a kind of peace with the saying. She didn't get to see the company really take off. She saw the start of it. She thought it was going to be fine. A pause. She was usually right about things. "My dad's gone too," Ethan said. 8 years. He was the kind of man who fixed things. I think I got that from him. He looked at his soup. He never said much about feelings or any of that. He just showed up and did the work. I used to think that was the model. Show up, do the work, that's how you prove you care. And now? Now I think showing up is necessary but not sufficient, he said. You can show up and still be completely unreachable. She looked at him with that stillness. Was that you? With Rachel? He considered. Some of it. I was there. I worked hard. I was a good provider, technically. But somewhere in all the showing up, I stopped talking. I stopped letting her know what was actually happening inside. He turned his spoon in the bowl. She told me once that being married to me was like living with someone who'd decided to be fine no matter what. She said it made her feel like she was the only one allowed to have problems. That's honest of her. She was always honest. That wasn't the issue. He looked up. What was yours? With the person before? If there was someone. Selena was quiet for a moment, not uncomfortable, considering. His name was Dominic, she said. We were together for 3 years. He was smart, ambitious, genuinely good in a lot of ways. She paused. But when the company started doing well, something changed. He said he was proud of me. He said all the right things, but I could feel him getting smaller around it. Like my success was taking up space he thought was his. Did he say that? Not directly. He said things like, I just want to make sure we're still a team. Or sometimes it feels like the company is your whole personality. Small things, repeated. And I started editing myself around him, not lying, just leaving parts out, turning down the volume. Her voice was even, but there was something compressed in it. I was 30 years old, running a company I'd built, and I was making myself smaller so a man wouldn't feel bad about his own life. What ended it? I stopped shrinking, and he couldn't handle the full size of me, she said simply. He left. He called it growing apart. Maybe that's accurate. We grew in different directions, and the gap got too wide. She picked up her spoon. I haven't been in anything serious since. That was 2 years ago. Do you miss it? Being in something? She thought about it honestly, which he appreciated. I miss the version I thought it was going to be, she said. I don't particularly miss what it actually was. I miss having someone to talk to at the end of a day. The rest of it I can manage. She looked at him. Do you? Yeah, he said. I miss having a person, not a role, not someone who's there because the situation requires it, just a person who's in your corner because they chose to be. He set his spoon down. Lily's in my corner, my mom, Marcus, but it's different. It's different, she agreed. They sat with that for a while. The kitchen was warm and the soup was going cold, and neither of them moved to address that. Rachel called again on a Thursday evening in the second week of December. It wasn't unusual. They had a functional co-parenting arrangement, mostly conducted through texts about scheduling and a phone call every week or two when something needed to be discussed. This call started normally. Lily's upcoming winter show at school. A schedule adjustment for the holidays. Then a pause, and Rachel's voice changed registers slightly. "I heard the board thing went through," she said, "for the Brooks woman." He was in his workshop space in the garage, putting away tools. He stopped. "Where did you hear that?" "I have friends in the business community, Ethan. Millhaven is not a large city." Another pause. "I also heard Harrison's been backing off." "Good for her," he said carefully. "You were involved in helping her prep for it. Someone told me." He set down the level he was holding. "I gave her some thoughts. She did the work." "Ethan?" Rachel's voice had that quality. Not angry, something more complicated than angry, something that had history in it. "I need you to be honest with me, not about the company thing, about what this is." "It's a friendship," he said. "Is that what you're telling yourself or what it actually is?" "Both," he said, and the word came out with less certainty than he intended. Rachel was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, something had shifted. The challenge had softened into something that was closer to genuine concern, which was, in some ways, harder to deal with. "I know I wasn't fair to you. In the marriage, I know I left in a way that cost you more than it cost me, and I know you've been carrying that for 6 years while doing everything right by Lily." A pause. "I'm not calling to warn you off something. I just need to know that you're going into this clear-eyed, because you're not always clear-eyed when you care about someone. You see what you want it to be." He leaned against the workbench. "I know who she is," he said. "I'm not building a fantasy. I see the actual person." The actual person is a CEO with a target on her back and a life that runs on a completely different track than yours. "I know what her life looks like." "I'm sure you do. I'm asking if that's going to be enough for you long term." "You need a lot, Ethan. You don't admit it, but you need consistency, closeness, someone who's actually available, not someone who's always going to be one phone call away from a crisis that takes them somewhere you can't follow." He thought about Selena at the kitchen table 2 weeks ago, her hands around a mug at 10:30 at night, the spreadsheet open, and the fatigue sitting in her face. He thought about the way she'd talked about her mother, about making herself smaller for someone who couldn't hold her full size. "I'll figure it out," he said. "That's not the same as being clear-eyed." "I know." He paused. "But it's what I have right now." Rachel made a small sound that wasn't quite agreement and wasn't quite resignation. "Just take care of yourself too," she said, "not just everyone else." After she hung up, he stood in the garage for a while in the cold. The thing about Rachel had always been, she wasn't wrong about the ways he could fail. She just didn't have complete information about who he was becoming. He wasn't sure he did either. The moment that broke things open happened on a Saturday, and it wasn't dramatic the way dramatic things are supposed to be. It didn't arrive announced. He and Lily had run into Selena at the farmer's market downtown. Genuinely run into her, not planned, both of them reaching for the same variety of apple from the same bin and looking up at each other with identical expressions of mild surprise. Lily had immediately said, "I knew it," with the confidence of someone who'd been expecting this to happen, which neither of them addressed. They walked through the market together. Lily held a bag. Selena bought bread from a vendor she knew, and they talked briefly about the vendor's new location, and Ethan watched the ease with which she moved through that exchange. Direct, warm, not performing anything, and felt something simple and clear. They got coffee from a cart at the edge of the market and stood in the weak December sun, Lily occupied with a paper bag of kettle corn someone had given her, and Selena said, "I'm going to the city Monday, the Vertex office. I might be there most of the week. How do you feel about that?" "Professionally, fine. Personally," she paused, "I don't love being away from here." She looked at him sideways. "I didn't used to mind it. The apartment in the city was convenient, and the commute was easy, and I had my routines there." She paused again. "I think Millhaven has more pull than it used to." He didn't say anything. He watched Lily attempt to share kettle corn with a dog that was passing by on a leash. "Lily, don't feed the dog without asking the owner," he called. Lily looked at the dog owner, who nodded. She fed the dog. "She's very good at finding loopholes," Selena said. "She's had a good teacher," he said. Selena laughed, the real one, the one with gravel in it, and bumped his shoulder with hers, a brief thing, contact without announcement, and he felt it all the way through. They stood there in the winter sun for another 20 minutes, talking about nothing in particular, Lily orbiting them in the way children orbit things that feel stable, and at some point Ethan understood, without it being said, that they were past the part where either of them was pretending this was something other than what it was. He went to her house that evening, alone. Lily was at a sleepover, one of the increasingly elaborate social events that 7-year-olds apparently now required, with a theme and a goodie bag involved. Selena opened the door and said, "I made dinner. Actual dinner. You might want to decide in advance if you're staying for it." "I'm staying for it," he said. She nodded and let him in. They ate at the kitchen table, which had become somehow their table. Neither of them had said it that way, but it was true in the way things become true before anyone names them. She'd made chicken and roasted vegetables, nothing elaborate, and it was good the way honest food is good, not trying to be anything other than what it was. Halfway through dinner, she set her fork down and looked at him with the directness that he'd long since stopped bracing for, because he'd learned it meant she was about to say something that mattered. "I need to tell you something," she said. He waited. "I talk to people for a living," she said. "I negotiate, and I present, and I make arguments for things I believe in. I'm good at words in professional context." She paused. "In this context, I'm not as good, so I'm going to say it plainly, and I'm asking you to hear it plainly." "Okay," he said. "I don't know exactly what this is," she said, "and I've been in my head about the ways it could get complicated. Your life, my life, the difference in what we carry, what Harrison might do with it, what people assume when they look at us." She met his eyes. "And I'm tired of doing that calculus. I'm tired of running the risk model on my personal life the way I run it on an acquisition. Some things don't have a risk model." "No," he said, "they don't." "I want to keep seeing you," she said, "not as a contractor, not as a neighbor, as—" She stopped. "As a person I want in my life." He was quiet for a moment, and she let him be quiet, which was one of the things about her he'd come to rely on. She didn't fill his silences with her own anxiety. "I want that too," he said. "I've wanted it for a while. I've been trying to be responsible about it." "I know," she said. "I've seen you being responsible about it." "It's a reflex." "I know that too." She picked her fork back up. "You're allowed to want things that don't have a clear outcome yet." He thought about Rachel's voice on the phone. "You're not always clear-eyed when you care about someone." He thought about what he'd said back. "I see the actual person." He did see her. He saw the tiredness and the strength and the loneliness she kept organized into productive corners. He saw the way she talked to Lily. He saw the woman who stood in her yard with bare feet and looked at the damage from a storm like she'd seen damage before and knew it was manageable. "There's something I've been carrying," he said, "that I haven't said." She looked at him. "I've been spending the last 6 years defining myself by what I can do for people," he said, "by being useful. And I know that about myself, and I've been watching this whole time to see if that's what this is. If I'm here because I fixed your fence and that gave me a reason, and the reason became a habit, and the habit became—" He stopped, tried again. "I needed to know if I actually wanted to be here or if I just needed to be needed." She was very still. "And?" she said. "And it's not that," he said. "I want to be here. Not because you need me. Because I like who I am when I'm around you. That's different. That's the first time in a long time something has been that." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, once, like something had settled. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. They finished dinner. The dishes got done, which was its own small negotiation about who was washing and who was drying, resolved by Ethan simply starting and Selena picking up the second dish towel without comment. They worked in the kind of easy quiet that has to be built, that doesn't just happen, that is made from all the smaller conversations and all the moments of paying attention that came before it. Outside, the fence stood solid in the dark, the new lumber fully weathered in now, barely distinguishable from the old. Just a fence, doing its job, holding the line between one place and another. It had stopped being a recent repair and become simply a part of the property, a part of the landscape, a thing that was there and reliable and no longer needed thinking about, which was, Ethan understood, exactly what good work was supposed to do. December moved the way December always does in Mill Haven. Faster than you planned for and slower than you wanted, the days short and cold and full of the particular busyness that the end of a year brings, whether you're ready for it or not. Ethan finished the Ferndale kitchen renovation on a Wednesday, 3 days before Christmas. He stood in the completed space with his clipboard and his final checklist, going through each item the way he always did at the end of a job. Not because he doubted the work, but because the habit of checking was part of what made the work good. New tile, new cabinets, the island the homeowner had added mid-project, and that had cost an extra 4 days but had come out exactly right. He ran his hand along the edge of the countertop, checking the level by feel, the way his uncle had taught him when he was 17 and didn't yet understand why that mattered. It was solid. It was right. He could leave it, and it would hold. The homeowner, a woman named Patricia, mid-60s, who had hovered for the first week and then gradually relaxed as she understood that Ethan was not going to cut corners, came into the kitchen and stood with both hands pressed together in front of her mouth, looking at the space with the expression of someone seeing something they'd imagined for a long time finally made real. "It's exactly what I wanted," she said. "Glad it worked out," he said. "No, I mean it's exactly what I wanted, which almost never happens. You pay for something and you get something close, or something different that you learn to like. This is just exactly right." He wrote up the final invoice at her table, and when he handed it to her, she didn't look at the number before she said, "Whatever you need for the next project, I've already told 3 people your name." She paused. "You're a rare kind of person, Mr. Walker. You do what you say you're going to do." He drove home thinking about that. You do what you say you're going to do. It was meant as a compliment, and he took it as one. But somewhere on the drive home, he also felt the underside of it. The way a life built entirely on reliability could become a life where reliability was all you were. Where the work was good and the word was good, and the person behind it was somehow still waiting to be seen as more than the sum of the jobs he'd completed. He thought about what Selena had said on one of the evenings in early December, sitting at the kitchen table with her tea and the rain coming down outside. You build things that last, but you act like you're surprised when someone wants to keep you around after the job is done. He hadn't had a good answer then. He was still working on one. Christmas at his mother's house was loud in the way family Christmases are when the alternative, quiet, measured, manageable, is not something anyone actually wants. His sister flew in from Phoenix with her husband and their 2 kids, who were 8 and 11 and had not yet learned to modulate their energy indoors, which Lily found electrifying. His mother cooked too much food and then worried it wasn't enough. Marcus came by in the evening with a bottle of something and stayed for 3 hours talking about nothing in particular, which was exactly what that kind of evening required. Ethan sat in his mother's living room at 9 o'clock at night, watching Lily and his niece and nephew do something involving a card game that had apparently acquired new rules no one had written down, and his mother sat beside him and said without preamble, in the way she said things when she'd been waiting for the right moment for a while, "Tell me about the woman on your street." He looked at her. "How do you know about that?" "Lily told me," his mother said. "Lily tells me everything. That's why I always ask her first." "Lily is 7. "Lily is perceptive," his mother said. "She said you smile different when you talk about her. Lily's words." He looked at the card game. "Smile different. Like it's not for anyone in particular," his mother said. "Just the thought of the thing. That's a specific kind of smile, Ethan. I haven't seen it in a long time." He didn't argue. He told her a version of it, not all of it, but enough. The fence, the conversation keys, the board situation, the slow accumulation of evenings that had turned into something he hadn't planned for. His mother listened without interrupting, which was her best quality and the one he'd most inherited. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "What are you scared of?" she said. "Getting it wrong," he said. "Letting it become something neither of us is ready for, and then—" "You've been ready," his mother said. "You've been ready for years. You just keep deciding the timing isn't right or the situation isn't clean enough."
She looked at him with the directness of a woman who had watched her son manage his own life with enormous care and tremendous loneliness for a long time. There is no clean situation, baby. There's just the people and the choice. He thought about that for the rest of the night. Selena spent Christmas in Atlanta with her brother. She texted him on Christmas morning, just a photo of what appeared to be a truly catastrophic jollof rice situation in someone's kitchen with the caption, "He tried to teach me. We're getting takeout." He laughed and texted back, "Merry Christmas." She sent back, "Merry Christmas, Ethan." And then, after a pause, "Coming home Thursday." He sent back, "Good." Just that one word. But he felt her read it the way he meant it. She came home Thursday, and they had dinner at his house for the first time. It had been her suggestion, lightly made. She'd said she was tired of her own kitchen, which he suspected was only partially the reason, and he'd said he'd cook something, which he was genuinely capable of, and she'd said okay with the particular ease of someone who has been waiting to be invited somewhere and is relieved not to have to ask. He made a chicken stew that his mother had taught him, thick and slow-cooked, with bread from the same vendor at the farmer's market, and Lily set the table with a formality she usually did not apply to weeknight dinners, including, he noticed, the cloth napkins that normally lived in the back of the linen drawer. Selena arrived at 6:30 with a bottle of sparkling cider. She'd remembered, from some offhand comment weeks ago, that he didn't drink much, which was the kind of remembered detail that does quiet work in a person. And Lily opened the door before she'd finished knocking. "I set the table," Lily said immediately. "I can see that," Selena said, stepping inside and looking at the carefully arranged napkins. "Those folds are very professional." "I watched a video," Lily said. Ethan came out of the kitchen and they looked at each other across the small entryway of his house, which was nothing like her house, older, smaller, full of the specific clutter of a working life and a child's life occupying the same space. And she looked around with an expression that was not polite interest but actual attention, taking in the framed drawings on the hallway wall that were Lily's, the worn spot on the stair carpet, the level hanging on a hook near the door like a habit rather than a decoration. "This is a good house," she said. "It's not much," he said. That's not what I said." She looked at him. "I said it's good." He understood what she meant. They ate at the kitchen table, his kitchen table this time, and the dinner was easy in the way things are easy when enough groundwork has been laid. Lily talked about winter break with the focused enthusiasm she brought to all topics, covering her cousins, the card game, the new book her grandmother had given her, and a theory she was developing about whether dogs could understand sarcasm. Selena engaged with each topic with genuine interest and without condescension, asking follow-up questions that Lily visibly appreciated, and at some point Ethan stopped eating and just watched the two of them talking and felt something so specific and clear that it was almost startling in its simplicity. This was what he wanted, not an idea of something, this actual thing, right here, at this table. After dinner, Lily went to bed with minimal negotiation. She was tired from the week and she had, in her characteristic way, assessed the situation and decided that this particular evening required her to be cooperative. Ethan came back to the kitchen to find Selena already washing the dishes, which she was doing with the confidence of someone who had found where things lived and decided to use that information. "You don't have to do that," he said. "You cooked," she said. "That's how it works." He picked up the dish towel. They did the dishes in the same easy quiet they'd found in her kitchen 3 weeks ago, the same rhythm, and when the last pan was dry and put away, she turned and leaned against the counter and looked at him with the kind of stillness that meant she was getting ready to say something direct. "What are you thinking?" she said. "I'm thinking this felt normal," he said. "And I don't mean ordinary, I mean the right kind of normal, like it fit." "It did fit," she said. "That scares me a little," he said. "Not because I want it to stop, because I want it to continue, and I don't know what that looks like yet, practically. Your life runs on a different track than mine. Your work pulls you in directions I can't always follow. I have Lily, I have a schedule that doesn't bend very much." "I know all of that," she said. "I know you know it," he said. "I'm saying it because I want to be honest about it before we go further, not to pump the brakes, just to say it out loud so we're starting from the same place." She looked at him for a long moment. Then, "I spent 2 years after Dominic treating my personal life like a risk analysis.
calculating what I could afford to feel, what exposure I could manage. And I was safe. And I was successful. And I was alone. And the post-it on my refrigerator was from my assistant because there was nobody else to put it there. She paused. I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to be that careful. I don't want you to be that careful either, he said. Then we figure it out, she said. Not perfectly, not all at once. We figure it out the way you figure out a complicated job, one problem at a time, with the understanding that some of it you can't see until you're in the middle of it. He recognized the logic. It was the way he thought about work. He'd never applied it to this before, not consciously. And when we get to a part we can't figure out, we say so, she said. That's the whole thing, Ethan. We just say so, instead of going quiet or going away. He stood in his kitchen and understood something in that moment that he had been building toward without knowing it. Rachel had said he went quiet. Dominic had needed Selena smaller. Two people, two different shapes of the same problem. The way people in pain make themselves into something manageable rather than saying out loud what they actually need. Okay, he said. Oh, okay, she said. He stepped toward her and she stayed where she was, watching him, and when he was close enough, he put one hand against the counter beside her and she looked up at him with no trace of performance, no armor, nothing managed, just her, the actual person, the woman who burned the jollof rice and held the gate open for men who deserved worse, and built a company with her hands and her mind and had been waiting, in the specific way strong people wait, for someone who could hold her full size without flinching. He kissed her. She kissed him back. It was not a perfect moment in the cinematic sense. His elbow knocked the dish rack slightly. She made a small surprise sound that turned into a laugh, and they were both grinning when they pulled apart, which was exactly right, which was the human version of the thing rather than the performed version. The dish rack, she said. I'll fix it, he said. I know you will, she said. That's not a compliment, by the way. You don't have to fix everything immediately. Habit, he said. I know, she said. We're working on it. January came and brought its own weight, the way January does. The brightness of the new year rubbing up against the plain reality of still being yourself in it, with all the same good and difficult things intact. But some things had shifted, and shifts, once made, don't unmake themselves. Harrison resigned from the Vertex board in mid-January. He sent a formal letter citing personal reasons and the desire to focus on other commitments, which was the language people used when they had lost something and preferred not to have the loss documented specifically. Selena told Ethan over the phone on a Tuesday morning, and her voice was steady in the way it was when she had already processed something privately and was now simply reporting the outcome. How do you feel? He asked. Relieved, she said, and a little tired of how long that took. A pause. And fine. I'm fine. Good fine or managing fine? Good fine, she said. Actually good. Another pause. I want to take the team out to dinner Friday. Dana and the senior staff. Will you be able to get someone for Lily? Yeah, he said. I'll ask my mom. Come with me, she said. Not as anything official. Just come. He went. He sat at the end of a long restaurant table with a group of people who had worked hard for something and were celebrating it, and he was quiet in the way he was comfortable being quiet. And Selena moved through the table, talking and laughing and holding the room with the ease of someone who had earned the space she occupied. And at some point she caught his eye from across the table and held it for just a moment, not saying anything, just seeing him there and being glad about it. He was glad too, though. February brought the frost. Millhaven got cold properly in February, the kind of cold that made people check their pipes and their insulation, which meant Ethan had more work than he needed and a schedule that was running 2 weeks behind by the middle of the month. He was managing it. He always managed it. But there were evenings when he came home too tired to be good company for anyone, sat at his kitchen table eating whatever Lily hadn't finished, and stared at the wall for a few minutes before his brain came back online. Selena noticed. She was observant in ways that she didn't always announce, and one evening she came over unannounced, something she had started doing occasionally in the way that people do when a place has started to feel like somewhere they can go, and found him at the kitchen table staring at a cold cup of coffee, and she sat down across from him without asking if it was a good time. When did you last take a day off? She said. Define day off, he said. No jobs, no tools, nothing broken that you're fixing. He thought about it. Thanksgiving, technically. Ethan, I know. You're running yourself into the ground, she said. Not angry, just stating it the way she stated things, clearly and without decoration. February is always like this, he said. It balances out. I'm not asking about February in general. I'm asking about you specifically. She leaned forward slightly. You know what I've noticed? You're good at taking care of things. You're bad at taking care of yourself, and I don't mean in a self-destructive way. I mean in the quiet way where you just keep going because stopping feels like failing. He looked at his coffee. That's accurate. So stop, she said. Saturday, do nothing, or do something that isn't work. I'll take Lily for the morning. She's been asking me to show her how the Vertex website works, which I'm choosing to interpret as an early interest in real estate technology rather than just an excuse to use my computer. He smiled tiredly. She's going to redesign your whole platform. I know. I'm looking forward to it. She looked at him steadily. Take Saturday. Sleep in. Go for a walk. Exist somewhere that isn't a job site. You don't have to manage me, he said, not with edge, just honestly. I'm not managing you, she said. I'm telling you what I see because that's what we said we'd do. Say the thing instead of going quiet. She paused. I see someone who keeps giving and doesn't know how to receive. And I'm asking you to let someone take something off your plate for one day. He sat with that. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. Saturday. He took Saturday. He slept until 8:30, which was late by his internal clock, but felt like an act of genuine recovery. He made eggs at a pace that had nothing to do with efficiency. He went for a walk along the river path that ran through the east side of Mill Haven, a place he knew well but hadn't been to in months, and he walked slowly and looked at the water and thought about nothing in particular, which was harder than it sounded and which he had to consciously practice for about 20 minutes before his brain stopped making lists. He thought about his uncle, who had taught him the job, who had said once, on a lunch break at a job site years ago, that the best craftsmen he'd ever known were people who knew when to stop working. The ones who can't stop, they get sloppy, his uncle had said, not from being bad at the job, from not knowing the job isn't the whole thing. He'd been 17 and had not fully understood what that meant. He was 32 and was starting to. Spring arrived the way it arrived in Mill Haven, tentatively at first, a few warm days embedded in the cold like a promise, and then more decisively, the ground softening, the hedges putting out new growth, the quality of the light changing from the flat gray of winter to something with depth and direction. The fence had completely weathered in by March. Ethan noticed it on a morning when he was walking up Alderton Street toward Selena's gate, and he stopped for a moment and looked at the east side of the property. The new lumber he'd put in the previous November was indistinguishable now from the original sections. The same weathered gray-brown, the same weight, the same look of having been there for years. It had found its place in the larger thing and stopped announcing itself. He stood there looking at it for a moment and felt something he couldn't fully name. Satisfaction, probably, but deeper than the usual end-of-job satisfaction. This was different because the fence wasn't just a completed project anymore. It was part of a place he came to, a place where a life was being built in the slow, imperfect, real way that things actually get built. Selena opened the side gate before he knocked. I saw you from the window, she said, looking at the fence. It weathered in, he said. She looked at it. It did. A pause. You're proud of that. I'm glad it holds, he said. She looked at him with something that was quiet and certain, the same expression she'd worn when she'd said okay across his kitchen table in December, the expression of someone who has stopped hedging and started choosing. Come in, she said. I have coffee. He followed her through the gate. Lily was inside. She'd been dropped there an hour ago while Ethan had a morning meeting with a new client. And she was at the kitchen table with Selena's laptop and an expression of deep concentration, annotating what appeared to be the Vertex Property Group website with suggestions written in a notebook beside her. She found 3 places where the navigation doesn't make sense, Selena said, going to the coffee. She's right, Lily said, without looking up. The search function is buried.
She's not wrong, Selena said, pouring 2 cups. I told Dana this 6 months ago. Ethan sat at the table. Lily shifted her notebook slightly to show him. He looked at her annotations. Neat, specific, each one with a brief reason. He looked at his daughter, who was 7 years old and had walked into this house 5 months ago to do homework, and had gradually, in the way children do things, made it partly her own territory without anyone deciding that was going to happen. Good catches, he told her. She should pay me, Lily said. She's not wrong about that either, Selena said, sitting down and pushing a mug toward Ethan. I'll put it in the budget. Lily closed the notebook with satisfaction. There were still hard days. That was the thing that didn't get said enough in stories like this one. The idea that things get figured out and then stay figured out. That once you name the thing and choose the thing, the complications dissolve. They didn't. They redistributed. There was a week in March when Selena was in the city 4 days out of 5, and Ethan was handling a job that had gone sideways. A contractor he'd subcontracted had missed a deadline and created a cascade of problems that cost him time and money and 3 nights of bad sleep. They were short with each other on the phone. Not angry, just depleted. 2 people running on the fumes of their own separate stresses, trying to be present for each other and not quite managing it. On Friday night, she came back from the city, and they sat on the back step of her house with their coats on because neither of them had the energy to go inside, and Ethan said, "That was a bad week." "Yes," she said. "I was bad company." "I wasn't great either." She turned her coffee cup in her hands. "I kept wanting to call you, and then thinking you were already dealing with too much. I kept wanting to call you and thinking the same thing." They sat with the circular stupidity of that for a moment. "We could just call," he said, "even when it's not good. Maybe especially then." "Yes," she said. "That would be the obvious solution that we both failed to do." "We're working on it," he said, which was the phrase she'd used back in December and which had become, quietly, a thing between them. A shorthand for the acknowledgement that growing was a process and not an event. "We're working on it," she agreed. The spring night settled around them and they sat there in the dark, not solving anything else, just being 2 imperfect people being honest about the week they'd had, which was more than either of them had managed for a long time before they found each other, and is, when you look at it plainly, a great deal. But there is a particular kind of story that ends with everything solved. The obstacle cleared, the villain removed, the couple together, the music swelling toward a credit sequence. This is not entirely that story, though it contains some of those elements. Harrison is gone, and the company is standing, and the fence has weathered in, and Ethan and Selena have said the true things to each other in a kitchen and on a back step and on a sidewalk in the dark. But what matters more, what the story is actually about, if you look at what it was doing underneath all the surface events, is 2 people learning to be visible. Ethan Walker spent a long time being defined by his usefulness. He fixed things, and he showed up, and he was reliable in the way that the word reliable can become a kind of cage, a container that tells you what you're for without leaving room for what you are. He was good at his work, and good with his daughter, and good at turning up in difficult situations and making them better. And somewhere inside all that goodness, there was a man who had stopped believing he was worth showing up for when there was nothing to fix. Selena Brooks spent a long time being defined by her achievement. She built something real, and she defended it, and she refused to apologize for the space she occupied, and all of that cost her what it costs. The loneliness of being the strongest person in the room, the exhaustion of proving yourself to people who had already made up their minds, the slow erosion of having to be more careful about who you let in than any person should have to be. 2 people carrying 2 different shapes of the same wound. The wound that comes from the world telling you what it wants from you so loudly and for so long that you forget to ask yourself what you want for you. What the fence job started, what the coffee and the late evenings and the questions and the board fight and the kitchen table and all of it built toward was simply this: 2 people deciding one small, honest moment at a time to stop disappearing. Not perfectly, not without difficulty,
Not without the week in March when they were both too tired and too proud and failed to just pick up the phone. Not without the old reflexes, Ethan's toward invisible reliability, Selena's toward managed distance, surfacing in moments of stress and having to be named and worked through, but choosing it repeatedly, the way you maintain good work, not by doing it once and expecting it to hold forever, but by coming back to it, checking the joints, making the small repairs before they become large failures. On a Saturday in late April, Ethan was at Selena's property doing something that was not a paid job. He'd noticed in March that one of the original fence sections was starting to show the same early signs of rot that had made the east section vulnerable the previous fall. He'd mentioned it, and she'd said, "Fix it when you have time." And he'd said, "I'll get to it." And on this particular Saturday morning, with the spring light coming in clean and the air warm enough to work without a jacket, he was getting to it. He was replacing 2 posts in the south run when Lily appeared with a glass of water and the dog-eared notebook she used for everything. "Selena says lunch in an hour," Lily said. "Tell her an hour and a half," he said. "This second post is trickier than I thought." Lily wrote that down in the notebook. She looked at the fence. "Why do fences rot?" "Moisture," he said. "Water gets into the wood, especially at the ground. If the post isn't pressure treated and the drainage isn't good, it just slowly breaks down from the inside. So it looks okay on the outside, but it's already going bad?" He looked at her. "Yeah," he said. "That's how most things go bad, actually." "That's kind of sad," Lily said. "It's also why you check," he said. "You don't wait for it to fall down. You look at it regularly and you catch it before it gets too far." Lily considered this with the seriousness she brought to things she was deciding to understand. She wrote something in her notebook. "What are you writing?" he said. "Notes," she said. "About fence posts?" "About things," she said, and went back inside. He worked for another 40 minutes, the sound of birds in the oak tree above him, the spring day settled and easy around him. He heard the kitchen door open and close, and then Selena appeared with her own coffee, in a light jacket, and she sat in the same lawn chair she'd used the previous November when he'd been doing the original work. Different season, same spot. The chair had been out all winter, and had a slight lean to it now that it hadn't had before. But she sat in it with the ease of not noticing or not caring. She didn't say anything for a while. She watched him work. He worked. "You know what I keep thinking about?" she said eventually. "What?" "Harrison's face when I told the board that the Renfield risk assessment showed 42% potential liability exposure if we'd proceeded." She smiled at the memory, not unkindly, but with complete satisfaction. He'd been on that board for 6 years, and he hadn't done a risk analysis that thorough in 2 of them. "Did you enjoy that?" he said. "Enormously," she said. "I'm not supposed to say that." "You can say it to me." "I know." She looked at him. "That's one of my favorite things, that I can say it to you." He set down the post digger for a moment and looked at her, sitting in her leaning lawn chair with her coffee, in a jacket she'd owned long enough that it was starting to show it, completely herself, not performing anything for him or for the situation or for the idea of what a woman in her position was supposed to look like on a Saturday morning. "Can I say something that might sound strange?" he said. "You can say anything that might sound strange," she said. "That's also on the list." "I used to think being seen was about being impressive," he said. "About doing the job well enough that people had to acknowledge it. And I did the job well, but that's not the same thing. Impressive gets you noticed. It doesn't get you known." He paused. "You know me. That's different." She held his gaze. "Yes," she said. "It is." "I just wanted to say that," he said. "Out loud, for the record. I know you," she said, "and you know me, and I'm not tired today. I want you to know that specifically. Not every day is the March week. Some days are just this." "Yeah," he said. "Some days are just this." He went back to work. She stayed in the chair. The spring air moved through the yard and the oak tree put out its new leaves, and the fence ran straight and solid along the property edge, the new posts fresh beside the old ones. The whole thing held together by good work and honest maintenance and the ongoing choice to keep it standing. Lily came to the door at noon and said lunch was ready, with the authority of someone who had been delegated a task and was taking it seriously,
And Ethan put down his tools, and Selena stood up from the leaning chair, and they went inside together. The fence stood in the yard behind them. It had never been just about the wood and the nails. It had never been just about the damage a storm left behind and the time it took to repair it.
It was about two people who had been defined for years by what they could withstand, by their resilience, their reliability, their ability to hold things together, finally understanding that endurance alone was not the same as living, and that the real work, the work that mattered past the job, was learning to let someone stand beside you in the yard and not send them home when the job was done. Some things get fixed and stay fixed. Some things require checking and tending and the willingness to come back before the rot goes too deep. The best ones are the kind you don't have to think about maintaining because you want to. Because the thing you've built is worth the effort. Because you can see it clearly from where you stand, and it holds, and it's yours. That is, in the end, what it looked like to be seen. And they were finally, fully, without apology, seen.